And I will just with one statement: the history of this country makes it such as an Anglo-American coming forward with an affidavit. I understand what you're saying regarding the due process of law. I need a little bit more than that. There are too many of my people that have been that are dead because of that. In jail because of that. There was a time in this country where, again, one had to have any man of color had to have an Anglo-American even vouch. We couldn't sit on a jury. We couldn't testify. If I said it's 3 o'clock, no one believed that. I need you to come by and attest to that fact. So because they've in this climate here on Michigan, in this land, which is Michigan is one of the most segregated states in the country, believe it or not. It really, just because it's north means absolutely nothing. It's the Mississippi of the North. So as such, bringing a white woman, which is what remember that was Rudy Giuliani's star witness, up here to testify to what she saw take place downtown Detroit was not factual. And with affidavits coming from people like that, it undermines the any type of confidence in the judicial system. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Louis. And I have some thoughts on that. I think we can build on that. You're raising some excellent points, Louis. But David, please express your concerns.
Well, it appears to me that Louis is omitting or discarding something that's happened more immediate in Michigan's history with regard to this 2020 election that is just a very brief moment back behind us, and he would rather have us listen to and take as fact all these things that he's talking about based in the 1870s and other periods of time that he was not even alive, much less, I just think that it's a totally unfair comparison for him to be using his statements as argumentative facts that, for instance, another one even talking about focusing too much, in my opinion, on a white woman who had an affidavit. I also saw the same 4-hour hearing that he apparently was looking at, and I saw an Indian woman that came up first, who you could barely understand her language, but I understood it well enough to know that she wasn't a white woman speaking perfectly good English. And then there was a couple of more. There was a man and a woman. I think the man had a Hispanic last name, and the woman had she also was from India. These people are immigrants to the country. They were anything but white. And they also had affidavits, and they were making their testimonies too that were concurrent with the so-called white woman that he wants to tie in with the Reconstruction Acts and all this other kind of stuff that's totally unrelated. Except in his mind, and he'll admit that I'm just not going to buy as fact what his opinion is, and I yield.
Thank you, David.
And if I may respond to that, you can buy whatever you want. The woman, the Indian woman that testified in Michigan, was probably the most racist of the group. That's the woman that said, you can't even understand my name, you can't even say my name, and let's say some Chow comes up and wants to vote without ID. And that word Chow, she was referencing a Chinese person. She put on display the prejudice from Indians to Chinese and Chinese to Indians. So I focused on the one that I thought was on some type of drugs or intoxicated. I actually, at the time, I was typing into the chat, is this woman drunk? And that was the white woman who had a lot of other issues, who I thought was blatantly lying I wish they had to. If she had taken an oath, I think she'd been in jail for perjury. So yeah, they've got a bunch of racists, and they are racist. Like I said, Michigan is the Mississippi of the North. And we had people here that were surprised about that. But because I wrestled in high school and was involved in judo and, did AAU and had to travel throughout this state, I was the one always telling people, listen, you leave the tri-state area, you have a problem. This is farm country. And you get in mid-Michigan, you have a problem. So there are, and that's been proven, David. That's been proven. There have been all type of racial incidents here. So nothing, and by the way, Reconstruction, you need to go back and take a look and study your history. That period of time is very relevant to what's going on right now. Very relevant, specifically with regards to human rights. I yield.
May I?
Cindy?
I yield.
Yes, this is Cindy in Florida, and this subject matter has gone too far. I don't believe for 1 second that there is any racism on this call, that any of us that are on this call have any prejudices towards any people, no matter what their skin color, and I would really like to change the subject. I yield.
Thank you, Cindy. Louis, I do think that we've made the basic points here, and that it probably would be good to go ahead and try to move on to other issues on our agenda. Do you have any objection there, Louis?
No objection on my part.
Okay. I would like to entertain the notion, in light of your gracious admission that technically speaking, yeah, there is evidence upon which a court of general jurisdiction could assume authority to adjudicate this matter, that maybe for our next agenda that we put on an agenda item to review whether or not there is probable cause to form the belief that crimes have been committed as a result of the evidence that's before our court. I would like to point out the technicality of due process, that with regard to any specific act, one act, there needs to be at least two witnesses. Lewis's point about one person that's he questions the credibility of submitting an affidavit, we would need two affidavits addressing the same issue in order to establish probable cause to form the belief that a crime has been committed, unless there's some type of other evidence in support, like a dead body or something. So I think I'll go ahead and put on next week's agenda revisiting the actual merits of the accusation that there's been criminal fraud in this case, and then maybe we can get into the technical point of whether or not we got two affidavits testifying to the same point. With all the testimony that we've heard so far, I would think that would be simple for the people that are supporting Mr. Nally's general proposition here to come up with. And at that point, we could proceed to ask if there's any people that are willing to submit affidavits, like the clerks in charge of the recording booths or something like that, willing to submit affidavits calling the first affiants liars or anything, and maybe they can produce secret videos or whatever. It could unfold, and I think it would be good for us to go ahead. This is obviously an issue with deep roots in our discussion here. It's very timely, and so I'll go ahead and put that on the agenda for next week to take some time to examine the evidence in support of the general complaint that Mr. Nally and others in our conference here are inclined to believe is already been submitted in publicly available testimony and things. So
I have a question.
Sure, Louis.
Okay, on this call next week, are these people who are making these allegations to bring evidence and provide evidence on that call for our review?
Yeah. Yeah, if Paul and Michael or others want to, Chris, anybody that has specific affidavits, especially if they overlap on the specific issue of instance of voter fraud by particular individuals. Paul said he wasn't naming any individuals. We would need specific individuals. There has to be physical action by named natural people in any type of a criminal complaint. That's an essential element of a criminal prosecution. Under common law definition of crime, you got to have a natural person you accuse. You can't just accuse a legal fiction corporation or something. And so, I believe we could move forward in that manner, Louis.
Okay. The reason that I asked that question is that, without it, it's a waste of time. So, I mean, it gets into, again, a long discussion and opinions and everything else. So,
we want to avoid that, just like Cynthia here is appropriately pointing out to us that it can go back and forth forever unless we get down to the nuts and bolts of due process and whether or not we got natural, real people, both as complaining parties and injured parties and accused criminals. So we'll put that on next week's agenda then, and unless there's an objection from anybody. Does anybody have an objection? Hearing none.